Welcome to another episode of the Limitless Life podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Smith, and if you have not done so, hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another podcast. And if you love this podcast and you want some more tips and tricks on how to improve yourself, go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. There are a ton of instructional videos down below. However, for today, my friends, we have a guest, and he's dazzling. So that's his.
Oh man,
not a nickname. It's not a nickname. It's just jokes that people repeat. But
yeah.
I would like to introduce to the show Mr. Jeff Dalzell. How you doing, my man?
Good, man. Yeah, I shouldn't have said it because I left that nickname in high school for the most part, and but every now and then I bring it up again, and then it becomes a thing again. But yeah, when I went to college, and then like high school friends would meet my college friends, they'd be like, and they would, oh, how do you know Jeff? And they're like, who are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, nobody in high school knew my name was Jeff. It was always just Dazzle. And I'm like, how did I I left that there? How did I become bring it back? But that's on me.
Fair. Yeah, and here I am resurrecting it into a podcast episode that you never know, maybe hundreds of thousands of billions of people by the end of our lifetimes is gonna watch and be like, Jeff who?
Jeff who? It's not Jeff.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, I have a question for you to kind of get the ball rolling on conversation. And it is, how is it that you impact the lives of the people around you?
Wow. All right. Well, we're starting. You're coming in hot. That could go a lot of different directions, my man. So it's been an interesting journey. So I was a high school math teacher for 5 years, coming out of college, and always thought, I don't know if you've ever seen the show Boy Meets World, but I always thought I was going to be like Mr. Feeney, right? Like I was going to teach for 40 years, which, there's a high bar that I set for myself, but I said it in my interview. I said it in my first teaching interview. It's like, I want to be Mr. Feeney. I want to have that level of impact on my students. And so I started teaching, and I was coaching high school football and teaching high school math. And I did that for 5 years. And I liked a lot of the aspects of it, and to be able to impact my students in that way. But got to a point where I realized that the mechanism wasn't necessarily ideal. Football was a little bit better, but in New Hampshire, where I live, Northeast United States, this is in Texas, right? So like I can't make a living being a high school football coach. That's supplementary to teaching, and very few people really like math. And so kids would walk in, and so while I wanted to have an impact on them, and I think that there was ways for me to do that, the mechanism was a little bit harder because there was a limiting barrier for them, because they walked in and they're like, I hate math, before they've even met me, before they walked into the room. And no matter kind of how I did it, we still have a goal of math, which is a little bit harder. Football was a little bit natural fit to be able to have those conversations and things like that. And so there was a natural transition for me to try to find a way to continue to coach and to teach, but also to do it in a environment or with a mechanism that kind of better suited that, and to have a little bit deeper conversations. And so that's how I got into the fitness industry and nutrition training. And so that's kind of like from a global perspective, that's kind of the journey that I got there. But in terms of what I've tried to do, and this is actually a funny story because it just happened 2-3 days ago. It was wild. So my wife and I just celebrated our 7th wedding anniversary on Sunday.
Congrats.
And thank you. We beat the odds. So we were over the average of marriage length. I don't remember what it is, but I feel like
7-year itch.
7-year itch. Like we've made it past that. And so we went out to dinner to celebrate, and we're great restaurant, and we're sitting there, we're eating, and somebody brings, the food runner brings over our dish. And I was talking to my wife, so I didn't necessarily look up at who it was. And he was like, and I heard him say, he's like, you might not remember me. And I looked up, and it was a kid that I coached in high school football 7 years ago. And I only coached him for 1 year. He only played for 1 year. He was a sophomore, like, and I was, so like I knew him and I coached him, but like it wasn't like he and I had a whole oodles of interactions necessarily. And he was like, hey, I just wanted to say to you, like this, he's 22 years old now or something like that. Out of the blue, he said to me, and this was like I cried afterward. My wife looked at me and she's like in tears. He was like, I wanted you to know that you said to us one day when we're all kind of dragging that this is an opportunity for us to be able to be there. And there are a lot of people who don't get that opportunity to come out and play football with their friends in the afternoon on a gorgeous day and be able to be there and have coaches and parents and everybody who cares about them that are involved in it. And I just kind of said this offhand, not really thinking about it. One of 500 things that I said to this whole group. And he went out of his way in a totally different context to say to me that like, this is something he still thinks about, that like, I get to do things versus I have to do things from this moment that I had with him from forever ago. And so that's kind of been in terms of what I've always tried to do. And I would have never known that, right? Like he never said, like, I don't know, like the odds of us running into each other was wild. But to try to be that sort of, I'm going very long here, but try to be that sort of, I guess, positive moment in people's day. Like if they come train with me or an online client and we have a conversation to try to take, all right, hey, you're here. Like, how can we go to one level a little bit up? Like, how can we positively spin this for you? Like you're feeling here, like let's solve the problem. How can we get you feeling better than when you came in? How can we try to get you 1% better every day? Like how can I get my students who came in, a little bit better by the time they leave me, my athletes or now my clients? How can we try to go positive in this direction? And I think that that's the way that I've tried to, certainly with no perfection by any stretch of the imagination, but that's kind of the idea that I try to impact the people around me with, is like, hey, can we try to get one bit better and try to solve a little bit of the problem? Hey, you feel this way, what if we looked at it this way and maybe tried this instead? Like try to ask the questions and go that direction. And so beyond just coaching or teaching or whatever, even with friendships, had drinks with a good friend of mine last night who's thinking about his career and where he's trying to go with his career and just trying to think about, all right, hey, like he's thinking about going off on his own, starting his own business to do something that he's been doing. I'm like, well, what if you win? Like he's like a little bit afraid of him, what if it doesn't quite work out? I'm like, well, what if you crush it? Like what if you win? And to try to go in that direction, I think has been the thing that most people have told me as a coach and as a teacher and as a trainer and everything like that, is like try to help them believe in themselves and to try to see the kind of the positive, what they're capable of, has been at least how I try to go at it, versus I'm going to do it, but more of I'm going to try to help you do it. And so that's what I try to do with my kids even too. Like my favorite phrase, and I'll finish my monologue here in a second. But my favorite, my 3-year-old is, 3-year-olds trying to figure out what they can do in the world, right? They're trying things like, and so he'll be like, Daddy, can I do this? Daddy, can I do this? And he wants to do things by himself. And so like climbing down the stairs or whatever it is. And he's like, Daddy, I'm going to do it. And I was like, okay. Or Daddy, you think I can climb down the stairs? And I'm like, yeah, you can give it a try. And I'm here if you need me. Like the idea of like, go try it. I'm here if you need me. Like give them the freedom. I believe in you, but I'm also here in case this doesn't go exactly how you want it to. That was kind of my philosophy as a teacher. That was my philosophy as a coach. It's still my philosophy as a trainer. Somebody's like, hey, do you think I can do the 35-pound dumbbells? I've been doing the 30s. I'm like, I think you can do it. like, give it a try. I'm here if you need me. I'll spot you. And like, if you can't, no big deal. But like, give it a try. I'm here if you need me. And you're not gonna like, you're not gonna fail. I'm not gonna set you up for failure, but I'm also gonna give you the capability to, or the space to try and see what you're capable of doing.
That's really cool. That was a great monologue because there's a lot of, I'm making notes as well. There's a lot of solid chunks on that one that I can go on. So great monologue, dude. I really dig it.
That was a deep question. There's a lot of layers to that.
Yes. I do that to kind of to oftentimes kind of throw off the guest for a little bit, because it is a question that not many people get. And I think it's always better for someone to talk about what they do rather than someone else telling people what someone else does.
Yeah.
And I think when we're able to, at least it gives an opportunity of reflection too. Like if I didn't ask the question, that moment of reflection, like we got to time travel there a little bit. We got to experience not only 2 days ago, 2 or 3 days ago, but we also got to think back all the way to the point where this fella just took that message and ran with it and created his own context out of it and is still utilizing that. And I think that that's really, I think it's really cool shit, man. That's really cool shit. It's a great indicator of the impact you're making on the people around you. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. Well, it was an interesting conversation with my wife immediately after that, because she's a teacher as well. So she's a 6th grade English teacher. So that's actually how we met. We were in a teaching class at college together. And so we were both teaching for a while, and she's still doing it. And teaching is, I feel like, in coaching sometimes, but teaching is a lot like parenting, in the moments where like in the thick of it, you're like, I don't feel like I'm making any impact at all. Like I'm talking to a brick wall, like with my kids. It's like, he just doesn't listen to me sometimes. Like, don't do that. He'll look me right in the eyes and he'll do it again. Like, that's just how it is. And they'll smile when they do it, and so there's moments where you're like, am I doing anything at all? And we had that opportunity to have that conversation about, like, if you can think about, I think we all could think about 3 or 4 teachers, and we could name them, and we could think of 5 things that they said to us that are still with us 10, 20 plus years later, because of the potential for impact. And I think the same is true of our parents, good or bad relationships, right? The position of authority and the ability to impact people, there's something to not knowing it in the moment. And so like that was something I don't even remember the day that, I can't think of the day that I said that. I'm sure I said it more than once, but I can't think of that day. But like, he still remembers that day. And so realizing how small things that might be of no consequence to us can have a significant impact with a lot of legs to it, beyond just the time that it takes to do that, to have people come back years later and you not realize how even just the way you carried yourself could impact somebody in a way that you didn't even realize that you were doing in the moment.
That's pretty cool, man. I definitely want to tap. I want to tap into the Mr. Feeney point, because Mr. Feeney was definitely. I think Mr. Feeney was probably one of those teachers that you were just talking about.
Yeah,
like he just dropped knowledge bombs all the time in Boy Meets World, and I bet you that fellow was the exact same way in real life too. I wouldn't be surprised, at least.
Yeah.
Do you think so? If Feeney was your inspiration for becoming a teacher, what have you found to be some? Well, obviously, the story that you just had is definitely one clear indicator of your Feeney archetype at play. How has that teaching / Feeney archetype transitioned into coaching your clients?
Yeah. So I actually did a post on it, on Mr. Feeney just recently, and I'm trying to remember what I said about that, but it was like, he had a quote, so many quotes that are just these moments where you look at how Mr. Feeney taught, right? He did a lot with analogies, right? He did a lot of metaphors. He did a lot of like, let me take this thing of seeming no consequence and use it to teach a lesson that's beyond the scope of the specific moment. And so that's been, when I think about coaching, right, there's the nuts and bolts of coaching, nutrition, training, things like that, and those are important, but the what is oftentimes less of the issue than the how. I think, and this was true even when I taught math. You and I probably have not used the quadratic formula since we were in algebra 2 in high school. Like most people don't. Even if you're in the math field, you just Google it. If like, you don't need to memorize it. Like, but we can get caught up in the like, oh, I've memorized the quadratic formula. Like that's kind of a pointless endeavor. But what's more interesting is learning how to use it and in what context this is a potential skill. And so the ability to problem solve and to approach a problem with that sort of thinking is what I always tried to do with my students in the math classroom. Is I'm like, I don't care about like, I'm like, open notes, whatever. I don't care about you memorizing this. I want to see if you can apply it to the situation. And so that's same thing is true in the coaching sphere, right? So there's the mechanics of, we can get into the nuts and bolts of what exercises and what are nutritions and macros and all these kinds of things, and those are to some degree important, but having the perfect plan doesn't have a lot of value unless we can do it. And the challenge that most people have is not the what do they need to do. Like most people know, all right, I should probably exercise, I should probably sleep, I should probably drink water, right? I should probably eat higher quality foods, and I probably need to eat a little bit less food than I'm currently eating if I want to lose weight, or should eat some things that have one name, like, all right, a banana is a banana versus like whatever the 95 ingredients and the things in the middle of the aisle. We kind of know that intellectually, and we teach it to our kids, and they, we know it from an early age, but it's not that. It's more of how do we execute on this. And so I feel like Feeney and the teaching concept is always like, how do I take the circumstances of life and use it to illustrate more of the how do we apply this to this specific situation for you.
Nice. Yeah, okay. That was pretty, dude, you're crushing your answers. Like, this is fun. Yeah, this is good. I'm just, and by crushing your answers, it's not like there's a right or a wrong. It's just
yeah.
You're articulating it really well from a point that I am understanding it. Like, really, like it's just absorbing. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I got you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, man.
That.
That's really cool. So what do you think? So this is a trippy time travel one, but I really like the story with the dude that you basically taught. In the times where, so going, let's say another 10 years down, you're having your 14-year anniversary.
Yeah.
Not 10 years, but my math was a little off. Yeah.
That's all right. You didn't have me as a teacher.
Yeah, fair enough. So what do you think? Do you think that this moment, this conversation, having that experience, then having this conversation, do you think that you are more mindful, less mindful, or evenly mindful of your character, how you portray yourself, how you organize yourself, how you want people to see you? Are you mindful of that at all, or is it changed at all in that little bit of an experience?
It's a good question. I don't know if it's changed, but it's certainly a reminder, right? I think that we need to hear things more than once, for them to really sink in, at least for me. And I think a lot of my clients, like I say a lot of the same things to my clients over and over again. Like I had just earlier today, I had a client call with a mom who had gone away for the weekend with her family, which was great. And she had like a celebration, and she came back and scale was up 5 pounds. And she was like, oh my gosh, like I've ruined. I'm like, no, you didn't. Like, there's a lot of reasons why the scale could be up, and you've hit 6 of the 7, right? Like you didn't sleep great, you were stressed out because you brought your kids, and you ate probably a little bit more, whatever. All these things could be reasons why the scale's up. It's going to come down, and then over the course of the last 3 days, it's it's coming back down. But I've told her that 5 times before, but sometimes we need to hear it again. And so for me, this was a reminder of the potential of any given day to really have an impact on people. And so I don't know if it changes it, but it's a reminder of, because at times I don't think about it that way because it's my life, right? Like I've always trained, and I've always or coached or taught, and it's my job, and it's part of what my day-to-day life is. Or even parenting, like this is a great example of it. Is like I'm a dad every single day, I'm a husband every single day. And so I can get lost. I think a lot of people can get lost in the day-to-day of it, and not recognize the impact, for good or for bad, that we can have. And that somebody can remember something that I said as almost a throwaway 7 years later. So I think it certainly gives me an opportunity to be that much more mindful of what I say and how I say it. And even like we do stuff on social media, like, as coaches and things like that. And there's times where you can get into the competition thing. We were talking about our mutual friend, Andrew Coates, who has, 110,000 Instagram followers or something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't, you have more than me. And I'm like, oh, I got 1,000, 1,300, something like that. And I'm like, oh, that's nothing compared to Andrew. But you put 1,000 people in a room, like that's a full room, right? That's a full auditorium, or more, and the opportunity that I have every day there to show up and be that positive impact is, I think there's a responsibility there as well to in each of these areas to recognize the place that I hold, that I don't want, like, I don't want to think of myself as like, hey, I'm whatever this, but to some degree, for some people in my life, I am that person that they're looking to, that they take my words to heart. And so it's a reminder that I have to live up authentically, not fake it, but live up to at least being mindful of what it is that I'm saying, and recognize that for good or for bad, it's going to be remembered to some degree by some people, potentially.
Totally. Yeah, I guess it's good to be mindful of I like that. That was good. Yeah, it's good to be mindful of the subjective perspectives of others, but also view it from an objective lens, so it's not taken personally. And then when viewing the self from an objective perspective, you get to see how you interact with the world around you, and then go from there. I guess you can see the input, you can see the outputs of the inputs, obviously, because you just got that right there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
100%.
That's cool. So how long were you a teacher for?
5 years.
5 years. Just because I think it's a question that I think that pops up, or at least the fear-based question of the transition from doing what you originally want to do into a different realm of doing it.
Yeah.
Tell me about that little middle ground, that in between. Was there a lead up of you're just done with it? Was it a financial thing? Was it contemplated? Was it something that you were fearful of? And yeah, was it something that you were fearful of? And then how did you lean into that fear?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is an interesting, I'll tell the story for where this kind of came interesting and then go back to answer your question. So
Nice.
I left teaching and I transitioned into two things. So training was something I had kind of been dabbling in, but I hadn't really done in full swing until the spring of my last year of teaching. So it was like February of my last year of teaching. So I had about 4 months of overlap for that. But that was like the eventual play for me. But the safety net, quote unquote, was I had been helping run a photo booth business for weddings. Like, you bring a photo booth to a wedding, like, so doing that was something I had been doing, and I had the opportunity to expand my role doing that, and kind of take over the operations of that. So that was going to be kind of my day job to some degree. Like, it was going to be a little bit more of the safety net as I built up the training side of the business. So this was, and then, so I was a year in. So this is 2019 was my last year teaching. So a year into training and doing this, I left teaching for two what are seemingly recession-proof industries, right? People are always going to get married and they're always going to want to train. They are not, however, pandemic-proof industries. Those are two of the industries that were impacted potentially the most by this. And I had left one of the few jobs that was like salary was coming regardless, right? And so it was a moment, and my son was born. My oldest son was born 3 weeks after everything shut down, beginning of April 2020. So I was, in the span of 3 weeks, shut down, became a dad, and had virtually no job and no idea of when it was going to come back. And so that was more of where the fear came into play. Leaving teaching, it was always a matter of, like, I'm not going to do anything dumb necessarily to leave. Like, I needed to like have something that I was going to go into. And so like I was really interested in the coaching side of it. And I thought about, maybe I go be a college coach and get to a point where coaching can be my full-time career. And then I realized like what it is that I would have to do to be a college coach. And at the time I was, 26 years old and married, and that's the game for a 22-year-old who's not married and can sleep on a friend's couch because they work 90 hours a week and have to move schools every year. And it just wasn't the right time in my life to pursue something like that. But it was pretty clear then direction that this is where I was going to go. And I felt very confident when I left teaching that where I was going to go. It was the right time. I felt like I'd given what I could to teaching and was excited for the next opportunity. The fear came in 2020, a year in, when I was like, did I make a horrible, horrible mistake? So I had never considered changing out of those fields necessarily, but that was the moment where I was like, okay, do I go get another teaching job for the fall of 2020? Do I go into, I had previously worked in like insurance business analytics, like, do I go and get a 9-to-5 analytics job sort of thing? And I, for a long time, was back and forth with this, like, am I gonna make something of this? Because the wedding industry never really came back, and for 2 full years, it was all of 2020 and 2021 was impacted by this. And so by the time 2021 came around, I told the owner of the business, I was like, I can't come back. Like, you can't afford to pay me what I need. And also this just doesn't fit what I'm, so like, I had to go all in on training in the summer of 2020, a year in, which was a year and a half, 2 years before I thought I was going to be all in on training. Like, I thought I had more runway. And so that was the moment of fear, is like, even though I love this and this absolutely feels like where I'm meant to be, like, I don't feel like I've worked since June of 2019, since I left teaching.
Nice.
I don't feel like I've been on summer vacation for that amount of time. Like, it's been a summer gig. Like there's days where it's, you know, a little bit harder, but like for the most part, I love what I do. But I was like, am I being a child and wanting to pursue what I love when I need to be a husband and a dad and a provider and do what needs to be done for my family? And so that was the tension for me for it was until Christmas of 2021 when I had a job offer come in for an analytics job. So this was after, so I don't know if you, so I have a 3-year-old who was born in 2020, and then I have twins who are 19 months old who were born in November of 2021. So I had, in December of 2021, I had 3 kids under 2. And I was still building up a training business, and it was like, all right, do I need to go? Like, this is an adult moment. Like, we had just bought a house because our apartment wasn't big enough, and we just bought a minivan, and it was like, okay, this is an adult moment where do I need to go and make a real adult decision and be willing to sacrifice for my family maybe a little bit of what it is that I enjoy. It's not to say that I hated, you know, doing analytics or I hated teaching, but like a little bit of what I really feel like I enjoy, or do I stay here? And I had this job offer, and it was a big tension moment when I was talking about it with my wife and just kind of thinking through like, all right, what's going to make the most sense for us here? And the fear is, if I go pursue this, if I continue to like kind of bet on myself a little bit and we fall short, it's not just me anymore. It's me, it's my wife, it's my kids, it's our house. Like, there's a lot of legs to this, to bet on myself to do this. And there was a lot of fear there of like, do I go and take the safer route and get something with a salary that's not, you know, maybe as good of a fit for me personally, but is allows me to provide for my family in the way that I want to. And I think that there's a lot of benefit to that. So one of the things this is maybe a little bit of a different way to take it, but I respect my father so much for the fact that my mom, we're going to go a little deep here.
I don't mind.
You started it. You opened the door.
I did. I actually opened it, and I was like, "Come on in, friend.
Come on in.
Come on in."
So I'm gonna try not to get emotional here. So okay. My mom was a sales executive for IBM in the 90s, like vice president of sales for like big time, right? Like that was as big as it could be. And then on 9/11, she was in San Diego and couldn't get back to us where we were living in Atlanta at the time for a week. And so that was the moment for her where she was like, I'm no longer going to do this. I don't want to travel for work. I want to be home with my family. So she decided that she was going to be home with our family. And we moved back up to New Hampshire where our family is. And my dad took a job, and he was the steady, right? So he worked this job for 20 years. And there were, you know, he liked the people he worked with, but he was way overqualified for this job. It was beneath him. It was boring. It certainly wasn't intellectually interesting for him, but he was the one that he did this. And he was like, I'm going to stay here because it's constant. And I'm the safety net for our family so that my mom could work at times. Like she did some part-time stuff or not. And then when my brother left for school, my younger brother left for school and they were empty nesters, my mom started to go back into work then, right? She started to get back. So she basically worked then. She was looking for IBM in the 90s and it doesn't exist anymore, right? So she would work for like 18 months and then take 18 months, like leave that company and then be off for 18 months. And then she'd work for 18 months, not intentionally, but that was just her cycle for the next 10 years. And throughout that whole time, my dad was just the steady, right? Doing something that he didn't necessarily love, that was not necessarily intellectually stimulating for him, but he gave my mom the flexibility to pursue the things that she really wanted to do. He was able to be around for us. Like he coached my baseball team. He went to every single one of my brother's track meets. Like he he was dad, even though his work wasn't as intriguing for him, he put himself on the back burner to care for us. And now I admire that so much about my dad, so much. But the moment for me that was the decision maker was right at about this time in December of 2021. My dad left that job that he had been at for 20 years. And I talked to him about it right around when I had the offer, and he was burnt. He was burnt. He was like a shell of himself at this point. And he had spent his basically most of his working life working for this company. And he was, I don't know, he's 60 years old. He's like, I got 5 more years of work left, but like he had to take he took like a year and a half off from working just to like recover from the 20 years of like just putting out. I don't think he regrets it by any stretch of the imagination, but he was a little bit of a shell of, now my dad is a little bit different. Like I've seen a little bit of a different side of my dad since he's left that job, particularly with my kids, and that he's doing something that feels like he has a little bit more purpose in. And so I think that that was a big driver for me. And one of the things that my wife told me was, hey, even though this is a scary thing, and we certainly want to be able to do this, we more than we want you to do the safe thing, we want you to be you. We want, like, she's like, I want our kids to have the man that I married, the man that, we've been together now for 12 years. Like this, I want them to know that man, and the man who you come alive as this coach, and don't want them to have just a shell of you for the sake of some safety. And those two things combined, I think, were the thing that allowed me to step out kind of into the fear. Not necessarily overcoming it, but just embracing that, like, hey, I am scared of this, but that fear of what's going to happen. But when I kind of burn the boats, to use the example of like, all right, I'm not going, like, I had this job offer and that was about as good as it was going to get. Like, if I'm not going to go there, then I'm all in on this. And so I'm no longer entertaining this like I did for 18 months from summer of 2020 until every 3 months I'd be like, oh, this isn't going great. Like I'd go on Indeed and look up analytics jobs or look up teaching jobs. It was like every 3 months I'd be like in a place where I'm like, I don't know if this is the right thing. And it was finally like, she was like, if you say no to this, then you got to go all in. Like you got to say, I'm doing this, and it can't be you're half in, half out anymore. And it was finally like, I was all in.
That's
and that made all the difference.
That's a great. I really like your monologues, dude. They're very insightful. They're very they're good vibes. I think there's a lot of lessons in there. Something that a question that popped up that I think would be kind of fun. Do you think so now? So, given the awesome amount of context, do you think that now that you haven't gone down the same path as your father in the sense of becoming that shell in order to support? You're able to lean into the fear and able to take the characteristics of doing what is necessary at the time, that is the lesson, then applying it, like what you were mentioning for application. How can you apply it? It's not just about memorizing it. And then you have the combination of taking care of, you got all the aspects of the adulting, the keeping care of your family, right? And then you also have the presence to be able to say that you love what you do. Do you think that there has been a nice little harmony or a integration of the adult Jeff and the childlike Jeff, where now you get to be the adult and the child intertwined, where you get to know what's right to know what's right in each situation. So if your kids are like misbehaving, then you know when it's time to like go adult mode. But then you also have the opportunity to recognize being a kid in those moments as well. Do you think that there's been that kind of a integration? Was that this is just something that I'm recognizing? I'm not sure if you just participated in it, but it's just from your story. It's just what I recognize, and from what I can kind of gather from your vibes is that you got like that kind of that little balance there. And I think it's a sweet spot to be. It's homeostasis.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about even before we started recording the idea of the hat, right? And the idea that like there's things that are part of who you are, and kind of define who you are. And so the things that like I told you, like some of the things that people have come to know about me are like I like pizza and I like margaritas, right? Like those are some like kind of goofy things, but it's also like I love Disney movies. So like I've been doing a series of posts about like everything I know about fitness I learned from Disney movies, and like the
Nice.
lessons of Disney movies, and or like Mr. Feeney, or like I dance like a goofball, when I'm training people. Like when I'll doing a small group training class, and I'll just the song will hit and I'll dance like an idiot, or I'll sing in a high falsetto voice, and that's just like, so there's some part of it that I think that in being able to do the things that I do, something that I love, and I can feel free to be me, and I don't have to be and I can be me more regularly. I don't have to put on any sort of professionalism face for the sake of professionalism. Like I can still so the idea of adult and child, it's almost like professional and authentic, right? I think you can be both at the same time, just like you can be both. Hey, I'm the adult in the room and I have to be able to do the adulting things, but also like, so the moment that I think about with my kids, like this is a really great example I think of it, is my son loves to he's in the why phase. Like he loves to ask questions. He's 3 years old and he loves to ask questions. And so there's two directions that I can go when he's having a absolute conniption, right? He's losing his mind because I put his dinner that he asked for on the wrong color plate, right? Like it's just having an absolute nutty. I can try to like butt heads with him, or I can be like, dude, guess what? This plate is orange because it's what, I make up something ridiculous. He's like, oh my goodness, this is fantastic, right? So if I can be, but because I've not had to be a certain way all day, it's a lot easier for me to transition into like being childlike with my kids. And again, I don't do this flawlessly by any stretch of the imagination. There's days where I'm in nowhere close to this, but the transition for me from trainer, coach, to dad, to husband, I'm not having to be different in different scenarios. I can be the same me, just in a little bit of a different context. And so in the same way that like I don't just dance around for an hour when I'm training people, I also am like, hey, you should, like I'm actually coaching them. But like I can put on the professional hat and do what I need to do, but I can do it still through the same lens of who I am. And I think that's allowed me to embrace that a little bit more. So I think that translates into parenting. It's made it easier for me to do the transition into parenting, because I'm also like hybrid stay-at-home dad. Like I it's a little goofy to be like, I have at least one, usually 2 days a week, where I have at least one of my kids with me for some portion of the workday. It's just how it shakes out. And so for me to be able to be like, all right, I'm gonna be dad mode, put my kid to sleep, then sit down and write a training program, then have a call with a client, then he wakes up early, and to be able to transition all of those kind of be one is a little bit it takes some navigating for sure. But I think being able to just be Jeff in all of those scenarios has been helpful, because I feel like what I'm doing is a little bit more authentic to me.
I dig that. I actually just recently, this year has been a solid chunk of year for like just mental frameworks. So I've just become a lot more intentional with mental frameworks and just clarity. And it's kind of interesting because one thing that I recognized with my little epiphany is that for the most part, and this is obviously my opinion, but for the most part, I think that, or okay, here we go. I like to say that I'm not bound by banners. And in saying that, I like to think that integration is always easier to maintain than work-life balance.
Yeah.
And the reason I think that is because integration, like you said, may not be phenomenal by any means, but at least there is some fluidity between characters. And I like the overlaps, because when we can get overlaps, then we're just stacking good vibes basically. And what I found when I tried to aim for work-life balance or balance, one part is that it's harder work to try to keep all those things separate than it is to integrate each of those things. Another thing that I also think of, and this can tie into a question too. This is a cool little segue. But one thing that I think of as well is that with work-life balance, with work and integration, with work-life balance, it's not that people are searching for a work-life balance. They're ambiguous in their goals. Because I think that if there's clarity on the trajectory, then who we become is just a byproduct of what we envision.
Yeah. I think there's something really interesting there. And the work-life balance thing is actually, I feel like it's it's tricky, because it's almost like they're separate now, right? And so that means that life and work are separate. And we spend a lot of our time working. So that means that the portion of your life that you're working is not really your life, if you're thinking about work-life balance, right? This is like an analogy for it. If you think about nutrition, is like I'm on a diet eating kale and boiled chicken breast all week, and then I have a cheat day on Sunday where I eat the things that I really want to eat. And so you spend all of your time living for the cheat day or living for the weekend. We're thinking about, how do I minimize the time that I'm working so I can max. And so you're not really able to be you for a portion of your life. And I think instead of pursuing like a balance of work and life, right, the work is the mechanism, right? We need to work to some degree to support our life, but we want to, as much as we can, allow that to still be a part of our life. And it's one of the reasons why, now you don't have to, work is still work, right? Nobody loves every little portion of their jobs. And even though I love my job, and it hasn't, like, there's still days where I'm like, I just don't want to do XYZ today. But I think that there's something to, I love the idea of integration versus separation, because I think that we can get into the part of, like, a large portion of your life is not your life. And we work for 40 years, 45 years. And it's just like, to be like, all right, I'm spending my entire life trying to think about, how do I not do as much of this part of my life, versus trying to figure out, how do I embrace who I really am in the context of this, whatever that is. Doesn't mean that you have to love the work, but
at least when you go home and you look yourself in the mirror, you're not upset with what you're seeing. You're not chaffed. You're not like, oh, another day at work. I think it's interesting. So what was it where I heard someone say it? It was kind of cool, but it was when people, so, when people go on vacation and they're super pumped up, like a buddy of mine, he's like, yeah, I go on vacation. I'm up at 5 a.m. without any alarms or anything like that. But when I'm home, I sleep in until like 8 or 10 and I just can't get up.
Mhm.
And I heard a pretty interesting kind of thought on why this is. And it's when we find ourselves knowing with almost certainty all the things that we'll feel that day, then
Yeah.
we've already experienced the day. So
Yeah.
we don't have any purpose to get out of it.
Mhm.
And I think when we have, like, definitely have gotten a lot more into my like childlike vibes. Uh, and that is to create an archetype of playfulness.
Yeah.
And I like talking to strangers. Obviously, I do a podcast, so I talk to strangers often, and a child
Mhm.
talks to strangers often, and they ask questions.
Mhm.
And I think that when we when we when we decrease the domestication and we increase what the characteristics that we recognized in ourselves to the best of our ability as a child, and we can pull some of those back in, I find that there is a much nicer integration between young self, present self, and old self.
Yeah.
And I think I think balance is beautiful, man. I think balance is like, this is like a little tangenty now, but I think balance is truly like one of the simplest things that we can actually do when we realize that balance is not an activity, it's a way of being. It's
Yeah.
active and passive. It's hot and it's cold. It's excitement and lethargy.
Mhm.
Lethargy? Yeah, I think I got that one.
Mhm.
And and so when you were talking about like, when we're talking about this integration, we're talking about this work-life balance, and we're just talking about the self and the authenticity and the person that we can be or could be or want to be. Man, like I think that there are a lot of um totally my opinion too, but I think we perpetuate a lot of our own problems by preventing our own progress and pulling the past into the present with all those alliterations.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. Well, and again, going back to this analogy as an example, right? The idea of integration coming with doing the nutrition analogy again, right? So instead of eating like you hate 6 days a week and then eating like a glutton 1 day a week or on the weekends, right? Maybe you just eat some things that you enjoy regularly throughout your week, right? And so it's integrated. It's like, hey, I'm not just doing this on certain, it's who I am. Like I eat things that I enjoy, and I also eat things um that maybe I don't enjoy as much, but are going to move me toward my goals. And it doesn't have to be one or the other, but it can be both and. But the idea of also coming back to this whole integration thing, it's integrating, I think one of the things that is I think a powerful thing in coaching and a powerful thing in general is to actually define what it is that we want and what is it that we're building toward. So like within coaching, like I think about somebody comes to me and they say, all right, I want to lose 20 pounds. All right. So that's a totally valid goal. But the question is not, all right, I want to lose 20 pounds. This question is really, all right, well, where are you right now? Why can you not stay here? That's part A, right? Like New York City in March of 2020. Why can you not stay where you currently are? Well, in New York City 2020, if I stay here, I'll die, right? Like I have to leave. Like this is not an okay place for me to be. So it's like mom telling me I was all day, my kid's birthday party, we were at a amusement park, and all day I was thinking about wanting to leave because of how exhausted I was trying to keep up with them. That's a not okay place to stay, right? I'm not being the mom I want to be. That's a reason to leave. But it's not
Mm.
just I have to leave point A. I then have to know where I'm going, right? It's not just I can't stay here, but I also have to know where I'm going, and I have to know where I'm coming from, and I have to know where I'm going, right? If I just say I want to go to New York City, well, where are you coming from, right? We have to have the directions. And it's not just, oh, I want to go to Paris. What do you want to do when you get to Paris, right? I want to lose 20 pounds. Well, what does it look like for when you get there and you lose the 20 pounds? Well, I want to outlast my kids playing at the on the pool. I want to be the one saying, all right, let's go. Like, let's say yes, right? I have a mom who's like, I don't like to go swimming with my daughter because I don't feel comfortable in a bathing suit. well, I want to go swimming at this event, right? I want to feel good. What does point B look like for you, and have it be tangible and things like that. So when we think about like the day-to-day life piece of this is absolutely true too. And I don't know if you've heard of Ramit Sethi. He wrote the book I Will Teach You to Be Rich. Ramit, his big principle is like, you define your rich life, whatever that is. And so his big thing is like, you get to decide what makes your life rich. Is it, I want to be able to pick my kids up from school every day, right? I want to be able to sleep in without an alarm. I want to be able to go on vacation 5 times a year. Or I even, like, this is actually, I was writing this post before you and I hopped on. My wife and I realized this over the weekend. My wife and I have been on 2 vacations in 7 years since our honeymoon, of more than like an overnight. And it's not that we don't like vacationing. Vacations are fun, but we have decided but in that same period of time, we've gone out to a decently nice dinner twice a month. And so you get to choose what you really value. And for us, we'd rather go out to eat every other week and enjoy ourselves regularly than go on a great vacation once a year for the same amount of money. But we know people who go on vacations, fantastic vacations, but they never go out to eat. And there's nothing wrong with either one, but you get to choose what matters to you and double down on the things that really matters to you. And so when you think about the rich life that you're trying to build, exactly like you were talking about, the integration and what is it that we want to pursue, we get to decide in terms of work-life balance, like what are the things that really matter to you. So going back to my dad, for him, the decision that he made was his rich life was being able to give his wife the freedom to be home with the kids and have a stable place and be able to have the flexibility to go to sporting events and things like that. That was his rich life for a long period of time. Now, was it exactly the life that he wanted? I don't know, but that was the decision that he made, that I'm willing to give up X for Y. And we get to decide what is the thing that we were willing, because we can't have everything. So we have to pick the things that really matter to us and double down on them and cut mercilessly on the things that are kind of okay. So the analogy with food is like, I love pizza and I love margaritas. I don't really care about chips, right? I don't eat chips, not because they're not good, but like, if I never ate another chip again, I'd be fine. If I didn't have pizza again, it would be a bummer. That would be difficult for me. I don't want to say if I didn't have margarita again, because that starts to get into alcohol issues. But if I didn't have pizza again, that'd be a real bummer for me. And so you get to pick the things that really matter to you. Like, I like pizza. I like going out to dinner. Like, and be willing to be okay with giving up the other things that maybe don't matter as much to you. So when we can paint our rich life, and we can paint our point B as exactly what it is that we want it to be, then we have a clear point A and a point B. Now it's just connect the dots, versus meandering toward, oh, I think I want to have a house because I'm supposed to have a house, or I want to go on, I want to have a work-life balance. Well, maybe you don't. Like, maybe you love what you do. Like, if I had no kids and no wife and I was just a single guy, I would probably work 100 hours a week because I love it. Nice. And I could do it. And there's nothing wrong with that in a certain season. So you get to pick what matters to you. And just be honest about, I think, what does that look like? And then the cost of it, because there's a cost of everything.
Totally. What we say yes to, or what we say no to, we're also saying yes to, and what we're saying yes to, we're also saying no to.
Yeah.
Dude, damn. A lot of podcast reels in this one. Yeah. Who needs to make content when you just do podcasts?
Do podcasts. That's the direction I gotta go in with mine. I just keep punting on the hiring somebody to go through it for me. This takes me so long to cut it up myself.
Yeah, that part is one that I've been using AI to play around with quite a bit. So that, it's all right. It's okay. I'm getting pretty freaking quick with it though. I'm getting decently good at editing. Like it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So oh man, there's like so many good things. I absolutely love you define the rich life, create the plan, connect the dots. And something when you said that, Steve Jobs' quote popped into my mind where, and this quote, and then connecting the dots, and then you're basically all the stories that you had today and reflecting on my own life as well. But you can only connect the dots when you're looking backwards. You can't connect the dots when you're looking forwards. And everything just falls into place at the right times based off of the inputs, right? And I think it's kind of cool because now it's neat being able to have a reference point of Feeney between myself and you that is like specific, but I can now see how Feeney has influenced me without thinking of it until you brought him up. And then it started clicking. I was like, but now it's like carried over in that thing into life and that integration, basically this crazy subjective philosophies that we get to create and to live that rich life. Oh man, that was good. That one hit. Yeah, okay, now that I summarized that up, it hit the head, the heart, and the gut real good. Did you have any thoughts to go from there?
Oh, man. I feel like I've been monologuing a lot, so I feel like that was an interesting, that's a big kind of concept for me though, is defining A and B and what it is that we want, because then you can work backward to figure out how to get there. And so it's been an interesting thing in business for me, right? Because you have friends in the industry and everybody's like, all right, where do you want to be? And there's moments where I'm like, oh, I want to be doing X with my business, because I can see other people doing that and I could see how I could potentially get there. But in order to get there, I would have to give up some of the time with my kids. I would have to work more. And while I love my job and I would love to get there, one, for my business, two, from an impact perspective on a number of people I can impact, and I love working with my clients and seeing lives change and all of this kind of thing. My kids are young. I got 4 years until my twins are in school. Like, this is not a lot of time. No. And then it's like, and even beyond that, like there's, you see on social media, I see it on social media all the time. Like you get parenting, like, but there's a quote from Modern Family, and it's a popular quote, but it's like, you never know when you're going to pick your kids up for the last time. And so there are these moments where, like, my son started calling me dad instead of daddy, and he still goes back to daddy, but is dad more often now. And it's like, there was no warning for that. It just happened. And so these moments, they happen so fast. And so in the short term, I'm willing to, again, talking about the cost and defining what it is, I'm choosing to make less money right now and to have a smaller business, because I want to, as best I can, be around for as many of these moments as I can. And so I'm saying no to more things. Like I'm saying no to clients that come in. I'm saying no to opportunities, and some of it's hard. Like some of it's like, oh man, I would really, really love to do that. But at the same time, like, more than I want to do that, I want to be able to be as around as much as I can for my kids, and try to be as present as I can for my kids when I am around. And I think that plays into all aspects of it, certainly in the fitness and health industry, right? Like, you can decide how much or how little you want to pursue your goal and what matters to you. Like, is it worth it to you to lose these 20 pounds? Are you willing to give up what you're going to have to give up in order to do that? And if the answer is no, that's fine. You're free to choose that, but then you don't get to complain that you don't have it. And so like it's not valid for me to be like, oh, my business isn't, isn't on the level of these other people, because it could be if I decided to do something. And it's easy to flip it on its head and like, oh, I'm going to blame the fact that, or use the fact that I have kids as an excuse. Like, oh, I have 3 kids, 3 and under, and my wife runs her own business, and like this, those are excuses. Like it'd be easy to. That's a reason. It's a conscious choice that I've made. My kids aren't to blame. They're the reason that I do it. And again, coming back to the whole work-life balance, the whole point of why I do what I do, I want to impact as many people as I can. But for me right now, it's the mechanism for me to be able to be around and available for my kids. If I worked a 9-to-5 job, I wouldn't be able to, like, all right, on a random, I'm going to leave this podcast. I'm going to go and hang out with my kids for the rest of the day.
Nice.
That's what I'm going to do. Like, is there more work I could do? Absolutely. I don't care.
There's always more work, but this is a finite time.
And you choose the things that matter to you. And so it's okay for me right now if my business grows a little bit slower.
It just makes it more tender. It's just crock potting, dude.
Yeah.
It's just on an 8-hour, 16-hour slow cook, and it's just going to be pull apart at the end.
Well, and absolutely. And the other thing is, if we stop thinking about the speed with which we're going to reach our goals, but rather embrace the journey of them and recognize that, like, I'm not going to stop. Like, I don't see a point in time where I'm not coaching. Like, I'm not itching to retire. Like, if I didn't have to worry about money anymore, I would still train. I train at the gym that I train at in person, not because it's not a good value time for my money. I do it because I love to train people. And so when you can stop thinking about it, and same thing with working out, like when you stop thinking about, like, oh, I have to, like, you're going to work out from now until you die. So if and you're going to eat relatively well from now until the day that you die. So the speed is less of a factor as long as we get there and we can enjoy the journey a little bit, and make a big difference in our perspective as we go through it and our ability to stick with it long enough.
I think that's pretty sweet. Couple points on that one that I really liked. I like the acknowledgement of expanding or extrapolating time to accomplish goals, because it's always just a series of accomplishing one, then another. Like waking up is a goal. If my goal is to wake up tomorrow and I wake up tomorrow, I fucking crushed it. And so I love that you have the thought process of practicing patience, because at some point, like, your kiddos are going to move out at some point, and then you're going to have all the time that you already have the strategies here. It's just not the right time to execute on this one.
Yeah.
And I think that's really neat. And something else that's kind of cool that I want to reference, because I love that you said you're going to hang out with your kiddos afterwards, and it's kind of, and the thing that I think is kind of cool, because if they're like all under 3 years old, the thing that I think is cool with podcasting and recording, I really like the Gary Vaynerchuk style, where it's don't create, demonstrate, or something like that. Demonstrate, don't create. And it's just recording the growth of a person. So this podcast is a way of me learning to grow. Yeah, and 100%. I get to recognize the growth in other people as well. And it's inspired by Barbell Shrugged. There was a Barbell Shrugged back in the day, and one of the fellas passed away, Chris Moore, I believe his name was. And Corey Gregory is a big fan of Chris because they were on the podcast together and stuff for a guest. And something that Corey had as a reflection about podcasts and why he started producing content is that later on, all these podcasts, all this content is going to be there for his kids to see. So if anything were to happen, then there would still be memories. Like Chris Moore's kids were young when he passed away, but they have thousands upon thousands of bits of information that they can watch, and they can see who the dad was because of all of that documentation.
Yeah.
So I think something that's kind of cool is because I think like the conversation that we're having is like really hitting the feels. Like it's getting like right down into the gut where I'm like, fuck, this is like really cool. But then this is my contribution to the 7 years later. I'm forecasting 7 years later.
Mm-hmm.
But like, let's say, for example, your kiddos happen to come across this podcast and they get to hear you at this point in time saying this
Yeah.
as you're reflecting on both your past and your present and your future, and then developing this philosophy. I think that I think of it like if my parents had podcasts back in the day and I could
Mm-hmm.
see their changes from how I
Mm-hmm.
see my mom now compared to like
Mm-hmm.
back when she was 30, 20, so on. So cool. It's like actually being able to time travel. So I just think it's really cool where I think your message is awesome. And I think that your kids are going to appreciate it. They're just not going to realize it until later.
No, I mean, I appreciate that a lot. That really, that's what I hope, and I think it's interesting is, you know, my relationship with my parents is very different now than it was when I was a kid, right? Like when you're a kid, your parents are, whatever. And so just trying to recognize that in the moment, this may not be what it is, but like knowing at least again, and I love having these conversations because in the same way that like having that moment with my old player gave me an opportunity to like remember the impact, these conversations are opportunities for me to remember why I do what I do, the decisions that I've made, and to reflect on that with kind of clear eyes. Because there are moments, certainly, in the midst of the struggle where I'm like, oh, I got a lot to do, and I want to do XYZ, and the tension is there where it can be like, oh, I have to do work. I have to do these things, and sometimes I have to do that, and sometimes I can choose not to. But um trying to remember like what's the driver, what is the goal, what is the point B, and where am I looking to go. And then also the flip side of this is always interesting too to think about, which is like the road not traveled a little bit. So it would be, in some ways it's tempting for me to be like, oh, how much easier would life be, where would my business be if I didn't have kids, or if I didn't have all three of my kids, if I only had one, like if because the twins were a surprise pregnancy and then surprise twins, right? So it's just like, oh, we ended up with 3 times as many kids as we were planning on in the period of time that we were having them. Whatever, it's fine, that's how it is, and I love all of my kids desperately. But even more than that is I work with parents. That's the largest group of people that I work with. I don't think I could be as effective a coach for parents if I wasn't in it with them, or even if I just had one kid versus the challenges of three. And, or like, you don't want to compare struggle or anything like that, but like 3 kids under 2 that's about that's high level parent, in terms of like difficulty challenge, right? Like there are people who have kids with disabilities and all these kinds of things, and there's plenty of things that are more challenging but the fact that we went through what we went through, I think I became a more effective coach. And so who knows where my business might have been if I didn't have kids, or if I only had one kid. I might think that I would be further along because I would have more time, but I don't know if I would be the coach that I am now because of the ways that this has formed me. And so I think that there's a lot of things that we can think about. Oh, how did I get here? Versus thinking about, well, how did getting here form me into the person that maybe I need to be in order to go to where I'm hoping to go? Like how was the things that made a challenge me actually made me more capable for the things that are coming my way? Like how is this now my superpower? The fact that my wife is a teacher and runs a photography business and raises 3 kids and is, you know, sings and does all these kinds of things. Like I say all the time, she's a superhero. Like my wife is a superhero. Like I don't know how she does everything that she does. And there's moments where she's like, oh, this just would be so much easier. But I'm like, think about how much you've grown, like how different you are as a result of all that we've been through and all that you've been through. And while it's maybe not exactly how you would have painted it, it might be better. It's just different.
Damn, that's a good one, dude. I like that. How did getting here for me and actually make me more capable? That's a really great, that you can, if you, sounds like you've said it before, but if you haven't, you can just say it again every once in a while. Yeah, that was cool. Oh man. Okay. So this episode, in my opinion, is an absolute mind melter in the sense of getting to understand a person. And I mentioned this before, where I like to understand the person, not just the practice. And I think it's easy for people to just go to their profiles nowadays and just see, oh, okay, this person does this. And we take away the personality, we take away the personal component of it. And I think that I'm grateful for this conversation, because this is a conversation of getting to understand another human being on a similar kind of wavelength and a similar trajectory of and my kind of benchmark, or my kind of mantra for my life, is the perpetual state of self-betterment and being a positive contribution to the human race. And the day that I retire is the day that I recognize I'm no longer filling those two pieces, which I don't know will ever happen.
No.
But in saying that, it's been a very fulfilling conversation. Like, I feel like it's just been awesome. So I'm very grateful for it, dude. You got like well articulation. You definitely got Feeny vibes.
Poor man's Mr. Feeney.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I just wanted to like say that
it's been awesome, man. And I know that I monopolized a lot of the conversation, but you asked phenomenal questions and got me to do quite a bit of introspection. So it's been fun for me to kind of navigate it as we've gone. And certainly I take a lot from this conversation personally, because I'm a little bit of a verbal processor. So as I say things out loud, it's like, oh, that's an interesting thought that I just thought, you know, and to be able to kind of sit with that for the rest of the day, for sure.
Man, the magic of thinking about your thoughts. Crazy. On the note of thinking about our thoughts, is there anything that has not been said that you wish to say?
I feel like we hit on a lot of main concepts, but I said this to you before we start recording, and again, coming back to the hat and pizza and the margaritas and the things that are Disney and all these things. A phrase that has been coming to mind. So as you think about those things for you, like, as a phrase that's been kind of coming out of my mouth a lot with clients and even to myself, has been "just keep swimming." And of course it's from a Disney movie, right? It's from Finding Nemo. And but the idea of, as we're on the journey of all of these things, nothing's ever linear, right? Even from point A to point B, like, it's never, like, there are no roads that go just perfectly straight forever from A to B. Like, there's ups and downs, there's zigs and zags, and we have these things. And so whatever the pursuit of the goal is, recognizing that the only thing that quitting does is ensure us that we'll never get there. And the story that I have has been the best articulation for this for me was we were potty training my toddler somewhat recently. And let me tell you something. The second day of potty training, not the first day, the second day of potty training was individually the hardest day of parenting that we've ever had. Like harder than when the twins were newborns and my wife had COVID and she was separate and it was me and the 3 kids and my twins were 3 weeks old and I had a 20-month-old. Harder than that day. It was horrible. Like everybody cried, me, my wife, all the kids, all day, and we got to the end of the day and we were like, I don't know if we can do this. Like, I don't know if we're going to be able to make it through this. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to help him understand, because he would scream. He wouldn't sit on, he's peeing everywhere. It was just disaster. And we're just like, all right, the only thing we can't do is give up. Like, giving up is not an option, because if we tell him on day 1, no more diapers, and then we go back after 2 days to diapers again, what does that tell my 2-year-old son? If I throw enough of a tantrum or I make this difficult, then eventually I get to go back to the diapers. And now this poor kid, like, he literally his entire life from like 3 minutes after he's born until then, he's always worn a diaper. So like, we're changing his whole world right now. Mm-hmm. So this isn't going to happen in 24 hours. But the idea that like, oh, well, we can't go back. It's burning the boats. We can't go back. We can't quit. And if we put quitting on the table, then that's going to be the temptation. It's always going to be there. But if we say we cannot quit, we just have to keep going. And there's going to be good days and bad days. And it was about 6 or 7 days in of just him peeing everywhere. 6 or 7 days in, it just clicked. And we're, I don't know, 4 or 5 months in now, and kid hasn't had an accident since that day.
Nice.
It took us a week, but it was a week of awful. And sometimes it's longer, you know, whatever. But it's just, the only thing we can't do is give up. And if you take giving up off the table, you might have to reroute, you might have to pivot. So in that process, right, we bought a new toilet for him because the one that we bought was too low and he was freaking out when he was trying to sit down. So we pivoted, we got him a different one to make it a little bit easier, right? So don't just keep ramming your head against the wall if it's not working. But you're not going to just stop. You have to keep going and adjust and pivot and figure out where you're going to get to. And have enough patience and zooming out, we'll get there. So just keep swimming.
That's pretty sweet. It's gonna be a fun one, because going into the final questions on this one, you dropped a friggin' solid chunk of lines, bro. Drop some fire bars. So this one, and if there's a repeat, that's okay.
Yeah,
it is an option, because it's just so good. But I'm gonna set the scene here. It's the end of your days, right? This is gonna get deep too. All my questions are apparently pretty fucking deep. It's the end of your days. You got your wife, you got your 3 kids. Hell, you know that kid that you inspired, he's hanging out there too. Why not? But you're on your deathbed. It's the end of days, and you're surrounded by the people that you love. There's no content of yours exists. This podcast does not exist. And you have one piece of advice that you can pass on to the people that you care for. What is that piece of advice?
I need a second. Oh, geez. So I'll tell you this. Something about becoming a dad where mortality has never been more apparent for me. And the idea of me or my wife or my kids, it's a constant thing in my head. It's a constant thing in my head. So when I go there, I'm a little bit emotional, and so forgive me as I kind of go there. So
All good.
I think if I was going to give it, it's to love sacrificially. That love is an action, love is a verb, and it requires giving of yourself. And you can love somebody in any context, in any given day, in any moment. So like that kid, he loved me well by sacrificing of his comfort and being willing to go out of his comfort zone and to say that to me. My dad loved sacrificially by giving up the things that he wanted to pursue. My mom loved sacrificially by giving up a amazing career for 10 years to come home. My wife loves sacrificially by giving up how patient she is with me. My kids, even in their young times as they are right now, they show what love is because they give up little things. Like my toddler, my 3-year-old wants something that his sister has, and every now and then he'll go give it to her. And he's like, here you go, sissy, you can have this. And to understand that that's what I think love really looks like, is that love requires sacrifice.
That's honestly, like after the whole conversation, I was like, I don't know where he's gonna go because he already dropped so much knowledge bombs. But dude, that was love sacrificially. Damn. I think that's so cool. I like the contrast of it because we see love as such a positive entity or a being or experience or essence. I said, I'll go with essence. And then we see sacrifice as such an essence that's on the opposite end of the spectrum. But I think that in that duality of loving sacrificially, we find abundance and peace. And I think that that's the best place to be when we can practice being peaceful. And that's embodying the dualities that we exist in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely got me thinking with that one there. That's a good one, dude. Fuck. I'm gonna write that on the whiteboard. on that note, on the last question, this is like a really good one. This is like a great call. Like I'm just freaking shooting the shit, man. But going with a little time travel ish on this one as well. So the very best version of Jeff Dalzell, there we go, is sitting next to you, just hanging out. And you can imagine this version as an older version of you, or just like the prime version that you're just like, Jeff, you're a fucking badass. So that person is standing next to you. What piece of advice does that Jeff have for you? What piece of wisdom does that Jeff have for you in this specific season of your life?
I feel like it's kind of a combination of a couple of things that we've already talked about, but the idea of just keep swimming comes to mind. But I think even more than that, I think prime version of Jeff says that there's a season for everything. And to embrace the season that you're in versus thinking about the ones that we're not in. So I live in New England, and this happened this morning actually. So in New England, our winters can be -10, and our weather today was 90 and humid, right? So I come into the gym at 6 o'clock this morning to train a group of people, and somebody in there is like, it's too hot. And I'm like, you can't complain about it being too hot, because in the winter, you're going to complain about it being too cold. Like we can't always think about the next season. And so it's easy for me. It would be easy for me in this moment. And this is the challenge that I talked about with my kids and I think particularly with my kids, which is this is a season of life where they require so much of me, and my freedom is limited, and it'd be easy to get into a mindset of thinking about in 4 years when they're all at school, and the idea that I could, you know, work for 5 days or the idea that I could, go golf with a buddy more than once a year, and those are not high cost things necessarily, but it's easy to kind of, well, wish away time feels a little extreme, but think about the next season. Think about, like, it's easy to get caught up in where we want to go or where we expect to go, or oh, it'll be so much easier when XYZ happens. And we want to think about goals. We want to have goals. We want to be thinking about where we want to go. But the idea that we're going to skip out on our rich life right now, to use Ramit's example, and all of the benefits that come from right now, it's a really kind of, this is the Southern boy growing up in Atlanta coming out of me, a country music song from a long time ago, Trace Adkins. It's called "You're Gonna Miss This," and the idea that, like, in high school, right, you think, oh man, like, life's gonna be so much harder, and or it's so hard right now, all the things, and they feel dramatic and they feel overwhelming, and it's like you had no idea. Like, every season is unique, and it's not just, and there's no season that I would necessarily go back to. Like, I wouldn't choose to go back to college over now, while it would be different, but I'm gonna miss certain aspects of right now in the next season. And so I think a Jeff who's like prime Jeff is a Jeff who fully embraces where he is and can be that much more present in what he's doing. And I don't know when that's going to be, when I'm not, or if I'll ever get there. But the idea of appreciating the season for what it is, because we need them all. Because again, the idea of coming back to the you're formed by something, you're formed by the challenges that come your way. The idea that a 22-year-old Jeff, if you dropped 22-year-old Jeff into my life right now, he would die. Like, he would quite simply be dead. Like, he couldn't handle it at all. Because you can think about it the other way, right? Like, 32-year-old Jeff would dominate in high school, right? Like, I would dominate in high school football right now. Like, I'm even in better shape than I was in high school, like that kind of, like, but also, like, have the perspective on it. But, like, I wouldn't be the Jeff that I am now without having gone through all the things that I went through. My marriage wouldn't be where it is now without all the things that we went through. And so, not trying to wish away hardship, but trying to embrace the challenges for what they are, and to keep going, and to sit in it, and to just recognize that you just keep swimming, we keep going. But there's a lot of value in being where we are, being where our feet are.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, my man, where can people find you?
Yeah, I have appreciate this, man. This is a great conversation. It's been really interesting for me to do it. So I appreciate you having me on. So on Instagram, it's Jeff Dalzell Fitness. So it's Jeff Dalzell Fitness. I have a Facebook group called the Fit and Present Parent Community, and I have a podcast called the Dependable Dad Podcast. So those are places to find me as well.
Nice. Sweet. Yeah, you dropped some knowledge bombs today. So, folks, if you love today's episode, please do me a favor right now. Take a screenshot of this episode and share it on your Instagram stories and tag me with my handle at DapperDudeKyle, along with at Jeff Dalzell Fitness. That is one of the ways that we grow. And until next time, my friends, Keep up the kindness, and I hope your day treats you as good as you look.